Welcome back to the Crash Course Podcast. My name is Craig Crash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott. You know him as B. Scott. Well, on Sunday, Ryan Blaney emerged as the 2023 NASCAR champion, and we are going to dive into it all. It was an exciting race, an exciting conclusion to the 2023 NASCAR season. We're going to break into it all. We're going to talk about the race. We're going to give you a race summary. We're also going to talk about Ryan Blaney's path to the championship. And then we're also going to do a little bit of a debate. We're going to talk about the playoff format as a whole. Is NASCAR's postseason format the best way to determine the champion across auto racing? We're going to get into that debate. We're also going to see if maybe there's some things that other racing series can take from the NASCAR postseason format and bring into their series. We're also going to talk about some things we're looking forward to next season for both NASCAR and IndyCar. So racing is over for the NASCAR and IndyCar seasons. A great year for both sports, and Ryan Blaney, exciting to see him. Team Penske gets another championship, but Ryan Blaney, a guy who I was surprised that he hadn't been. This was his first time in the championship and it was exciting to see him finally come home with a crown.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe to say now at this point, the two best teams in NASCAR at this point in time have to be Penske and Hendrick. I mean, when you look at the past four championships, I believe, it's either gone to Hendrick Motorsports or Penske. So that's great. And then you got to love the fact that young gun Christopher Bell was in the championship for yet again. That kid is knocking on the championship door, and I believe will be winning one sooner rather than later. I mean, he's a heck of a driver. You don't got to give him a tip of the hat. Yeah, he didn't finish the race on Sunday, but this is a guy that he's a kid. He's a kid. This is a kid that he's not always up there contending for the wins, but he's just a solid, consistent driver. And it just goes to show you that it's not all about getting to victory lane constantly. It's just about being consistent, and that it can be done in the playoff format as well. Because the playoff format, it rewards wins, but at the same time, it also rewards consistency. And we don't talk about it as much because it's just not as sexy as victory lane. But hey, Christopher Bell I wouldn't be surprised to see him win a championship in the next 2-3 years.
Well, I know last year when we did, we did our championship 4 preview, we talked about, all the drivers that were in there, and we talked about, Ross Chastain and Christopher Bell, and we talked about both Chastain and Bell being kind of guys we weren't expecting to be in there. So the fact that Bell, was in there yet again kind of shows that, like, hey, last year wasn't a fluke. And, not to say that Chastain was, but just to say that, the fact that he's there again shows you, like, hey, you know what, he's here to stay. He is going to be a contender for the foreseeable future, and that he is going to be there, like you said, for years to come.
I think Chastain last year was a little bit more of a fluke because he got in on the,
Hail Melon, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Hey, reason why he's my favorite driver in the sport, so I'll.
I mean, yeah, I've met the guy. He's a very nice guy, and love to see him win a championship. But what I'm really liking right now with NASCAR is that we are seeing the changing of the guard. For a guy like me, it's tough watching some of these guys like Kevin Harvick. I grew up watching Dale Earnhardt Jr., Jeff Gordon, Jimmy Johnson, Tony Stewart, Kevin Harvick, all those guys. And now to see all of them moving up out of the car into ownership or up into the broadcast booth, it's tough because it means I'm getting old, which we've gone over that plenty on the show, how old I am. But it is great to see that these young guns are making these moves now and are being successful. I mean, look, we've talked about it before with Hendrick Motorsports. They knew this change was going to be coming. The changing of the guard was coming. So they took their lumps early on by bringing in some younger drivers to get them that experience. And look, it's paying off. They had 2 drivers again in the final 2. I mean, and with William Byron being the youngest of the Hendrick bunch, and he's right up there. Basically, he was the best driver throughout the entire season. and making it to the championship 4. Kyle Larson, I mean, he's been around a little bit longer than a lot of those other guys, but still a young gun who's right there contending for a championship yet again as a past champion. I mean, that's a team that weathered the storm of youth and inexperience, and it's paying off for them now. And you're going to start seeing some of these other teams have to make those moves as some of these older, like for instance, Stewart Haas Racing, they're going to have a big offseason of changes. You're losing Kevin Harvick. You're losing Eric Almirola. I mean, you're pretty much bringing back Ryan Preece. So that's going to be really interesting to see how that team shifts into next season, losing 2 of their top tier drivers to retirement. But man, that was such an exciting postseason. I love the NASCAR playoff. I just do. We'll get into that more, but I just love it. It grabs my attention week after week after week because every race is important.
Well, let's go ahead and dive right in. The race summary for the championship 4. You had Kyle Larson, William Byron, Ryan Blaney, and Christopher Bell. Those were the top 4 racing for the title. Byron led the field to the green flag from the pole. On lap 51, you had all final four drivers in the top 10. William Byron wins stage 1. He was kind of in the catbird seat early on. Lap 109, Christopher Bell's title hopes go up in smoke after experiencing a brake rotor failure. That sends him into the wall, so that's 1 title 4 contender down. Chris Buescher wins stage 2. All lead lap cars pit. Ross Chastain wins the race off pit road. With roughly 100 laps to go, lap 211, Ryan Blaney passes William Byron for second. On lap 261, Ryan Blaney takes the lead, but Ross Chastain reclaims the lead a lap later. On lap 282, the final restart of the race happens, with Denny Hamlin leading, Kyle Larson third, Ross Chastain fourth, William Byron fifth, and Ryan Blaney sixth. Ross Chastain works his way to the lead. Lap 292, Ryan Blaney passes Kyle Larson, which is what ends up being the title-winning pass. Ross Chastain ends up winning the race. Ryan Blaney finishes second and wins the title. Larson finishes third. William Byron finishes fourth. Chris Buescher fifth. Blaney, Larson, and Byron is how things fell in this final standings as well. So that is how the race concludes. And so, we do this a lot, during the month of May, during the different races and the different, during qualifying and stuff like that. One word to describe Ryan Blaney's performance this season. And the one word that I came up with, thinking about, I didn't watch every race this season, but, I know there were some races where, he did perform really well, and there were some races where, he didn't perform so well. And so, with him winning the title, the one word that came to my mind was resilient. Because, Ryan Blaney, he won the Coke 600. That's what earned him his playoff spot. Looking at the rest of the regular season, though, he had 4 top 5s, 12 top 10s, but also 10 finishes of 20th or worse, and 5 finishes of 30th or worse in the final 11 races before the postseason. So he had some great races. He had some bad races. So, he, kind of the epitome, looking at it, because of, the fact that NASCAR has a playoff, like you see in, stick and ball sports, it's kind of like that team that gets into the playoff is like a, 10-7 team. They're the 2021 Cincinnati Bengals where, they're 10-7. You don't really know what to make of them. Just kind of get in the dance and see what happens. So he had some strong races, but he had some, crashes. He had some poor performances as well. He gets into the postseason as the 12th seed. He gets 2 wins at Talladega, then, of course, wins Martinsville, the second to last race of the season. He has 4 top 5 finishes. His final 3 races were second, first, and then second. He had 6 top 10 finishes and just 2 finishes outside the top 20 during the postseason. So his playoff run was just absolutely insane. He had just basically a topsy-turvy first 26 races and then really turned it on for the final 10 races of the season. Just kind of the epitome of just get into the dance and see what happens. And that's exactly what he did. And, I'm happy to see him win. I mean, I remember being a fan of Dave Blaney, which is his dad, the 93 Amico Pontiac, watching that,
That makes me feel old. That's twice now here in the last few years that a driver I've watched growing up, their son has won a championship.
Who was the other one?
Take a guess.
I'm trying to remember.
His son races for Hendrick Motorsports.
Oh, I feel like I should know.
You should know. It's Awesome Bill from Dawsonville. His son Chase Elliott.
Right. Oh, I thought you meant like this year.
No, I'm talking about just here in the last. Recent champion.
Okay,
yeah.
my bad. I was like, not this year. Yeah. No. Okay, so yeah. There you go. The legacy champions starting to make their way through. But yeah. I remember watching Dave Blaney growing up. I remember having his diecast car, that Amico Dodge, when they switched from Pontiac to Dodge. And so I was happy to see him get the win. And Blaney has been one of the big names of the sport, for a long time. I mean, that's what comes with being a part of the Penske brand. And he's finished in the top 10 in points every season he's been with Penske. But this is his first real shot that he's had at winning the title, because he's been in the top 10, but he's never been in the championship 4. So he finally capitalizes on that. Logano won the title last season. So to be able to win the title and get back-to-back titles for Penske has to feel good for Blaney, to etch your name alongside Joey Logano, to etch your name for Penske, to kind of
that names that go along with champions for Penske.
Right.
You're right up there now with like the Rick Mears, Elio Castroneves. You're up there with some big names in motorsports in general.
Right. Yeah, you're etching your name in that brand. You're earning your keep in that brand. Because heck, even just in general, drivers in NASCAR for Penske that never won a title. You're even putting yourself on that map. So, good for Ryan Blaney. Great season for him. Glad to see him finally get that title and get the win there.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I look at Ryan Blaney, the one word that kind of comes to mind for me is timing. What I mean by that is he peaked at the right time. He got in, like you said, he got into the show, and you just got to perform, keep performing, be consistent. But not only was he consistent, he continuously improved until at the very end, he was running some of the best racing he had all year long. That's exactly what you want when it comes to a playoff format, is somebody that's peaking at the right time. Great. You won the regular season championship because you won a ton of races during the regular season. And that gives you a good boost going into the playoffs, but it doesn't win you the championship. And that's what I love about this, is that it's basically almost a clean slate for these drivers. Not fully, because, the better you've done during the regular season, you're rewarded for that in the playoffs, which I think you should be. But, it's a clean slate. It really is. And I that's what I love about, that's what we love about the NCAA tournament. That's what we love about the NFL playoffs. That's what we love about the NBA playoffs. Maybe not the NBA playoffs. It's not as much a good of an example, but Major League Baseball playoffs, everything. It's just all about peaking at the right time and playing and racing your best at the right time. And Ryan Blaney did exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, he really did. He was able to be resilient, and in talking about all this, this playoff conversation, it brings us to something. We were going to have this debate a little bit earlier on in the summer, but this is I think a perfect time to bring it back up. It's a hot or cold question here. If you're new to the podcast, we do a segment every now and again called Hot or Cold, where we say a take and say whether or not it's a hot take or a cold take. And the take is this: the playoff format is the superior way to determine a champion in motorsports. And for me, I think it's warm. I don't think it's hot or it's cold. And the reason why I say this is because I've kind of gone back and forth on this. Because the reason why it's warm is because I do think it works for NASCAR. I think the length of the NASCAR season, it's 36 races as opposed to just 17 for IndyCar. 36 races. It goes from February to November. It's a long season. Maybe you could argue you could do it with F1 with 24 races. It goes from, March to December, but F1 is its own thing. I don't really want to.
Nobody understands the point system.
Right,
in
yeah.
F1,
So
I'll be honest.
Well, and it
maybe I don't even think some of the people in F1 understand that point system.
And I don't really know the best way to articulate it either, but it doesn't really seem like it's really about the drivers anyway. Like, I mean, look,
it's all about the manufacturer,
right?
Yeah.
And I know that, like, obviously in NASCAR and IndyCar, like, obviously having good equipment matters in those sports too, but it matters infinitely more in F1 than it does in IndyCar and NASCAR. So F1, we're not even including them really in this conversation of the playoffs because that wouldn't really matter for them, I don't think. But the reason I've gone back and forth, though, is that when the chase was first introduced, I was not a fan. Now, maybe it's just because I was a Jeff Gordon fan and the initial chase posed Jeff Gordon. He would have won that title if it wasn't for the first chase in 2004, as it was, it was known as the chase for the cup back then. Then you have guys like Carl Edwards who have never gotten a title. Personally, the run for Jimmy Johnson, 7 titles in however many years that was, really kind of, honestly killed my interest for the sport. Now, granted, it just, I got busier with other stuff. I didn't watch it as much, and it just kind of my interest waned. But obviously, the same driver winning year after year after year after year after year because he would just get into the playoff and go from there. He kind of had the system all figured out of how to just get in and then really excel at those last 10 races. Which, I mean, look, is great, is an art form, whatever, is awesome, but also is not great for, which is the reason why I'm not a big F1 fan, because I don't want to see the same driver win every week. So,
but at the same time, you have to look back at those 7 in a row for Jimmy Johnson and go,
well, he didn't win 7 in a row.
Oh, so yeah, but
he did win 7.
Jimmy Johnson, yeah. You just got to look at that run for Jimmy Johnson and go, damn, that was impressive when you think back on it. Yeah, at the time, I was like, okay, you won again. You won again. But when you look back on it, you go, I don't think that's what he pulled off was.
Well, it's the same way. Like, I'm starting, like, as much as I don't like Bama, I'm starting to come around on my respect for their run. I'm not quite there with the Patriots. I've separated Tom Brady from the Patriots because I kind of like Tom Brady with, he's kind of becoming more personable for me. So I'm kind of coming around on him. So I'm okay with recognizing his greatness. Especially when we did the debate last year with Patrick Mahomes, we're like, wait, we're saying he has to win like 5 titles for him to even be in the conversation. Okay, maybe Tom Brady is the GOAT. So
especially now what we're seeing with the Patriots, it's like,
right,
yeah, maybe it was Tom Brady.
Right. So yeah, so there are elements, and there have been elements of the chase in the playoffs that have turned me off from it. I do think that the elimination style and how they have it now is the primo way to do it. I think having the round of 16, the round of 8, the round of so on and so forth is the way to have it. Over the kind of looking at the numbers here, like over the last 20 years, the playoffs have been a thing. It kind of supports that it's not as kind of a free-for-all, not kind of as fluky as you might think. I mean, 8 of the champions would have been the champion in the regular points format. Only twice has the champion been someone who would have not been in the top 5 in the regular point standing. So it's not been someone who just came out of left field to win the championship. And like I said, I really like the round elimination format. It really works for NASCAR. So the playoff format really works for NASCAR. Now, like I said, I don't think it works for IndyCar in the sense that the IndyCar season is too short. You would have to maybe extend it. You would almost have to extend the IndyCar season to 20 races and then have it be 5 rounds or 4 rounds at the end of the year or something like that for that to be a thing. Or, I mean, I guess you could make it, it's currently 17. You could do like maybe 14 races and then have the final 3 races be an oval, a street course, and a road course. So you'd have all 3 types. So that's a version of it you could do. But I think what's more realistic for IndyCar, what they could do to spice things up, bring back double points for the Indy 500, but then have other, for lack of a better term, I know this is a NASCAR term, crown jewel races. Long Beach, for instance. I know that's that was referred to a lot in the CW series, the Road to Indy series, as the race besides the Indy 500 that everyone wants to win. So we'll have double points for St. Pete. I mean, maybe not St. Pete, because that's literally like 3 races at the beginning of the year that are all double points races.
That's true.
But maybe Detroit, Toronto, some of those. I'd be game for Iowa.
Yeah. Well, Iowa technically used to be almost a double points when they did with the double header, but it was 2 races.
Well, they still have the double header, but
yeah, I mean, I'm thinking Detroit. Never mind.
Right,
Detroit used to be a double header.
And then they also keep track of who wins on all 3 types of circuits. So if someone were to accomplish that, tie that into the points somehow. So if someone, I think a couple of years ago it was Joseph Newgarden who did that. Who won on a street and oval and a road course. So give him.
Or if you sweep all of one type, like Joseph Newgarden almost swept all ovals this year.
Right. So, or maybe somehow make it to where if you win multiple races in a row, have like a multiplier. Although that kind of is the antithesis of what we're doing here, but do something something to where it kind of spices up the points a little bit. Because I'll admit, when we originally had this thought to do this debate, it was coming up on the IndyCar and NASCAR's return to IMS. And it looked like Palou was going to run away with the title with 2 or 3 races to spare. So thankfully, Scott Dixon kind of helped close the gap and made it a little bit more exciting at the end of the year. And overall, I don't think this is something for IndyCar that needs too big of an overcorrection. But it still would be interesting to see some tweaks made to the IndyCar point system. And I think that looking at what NASCAR can do and looking at what NASCAR has done with their point system, like the initial chase, not a huge fan, but what they've done since then to make the playoff system better, I like it, and I think other series can take note of how to spice up their systems. Because, I mean, I've looked at, we've seen other rule changes in other sports over the course of the years, and I know a lot of sports are stuck in their ways, all that kind of thing, but at the same time, it's about keeping up with the times, making things more interesting, and I think there's some ways to kind of move away from kind of the archaic ways that, you have certain rules in place, and maybe make it to where, hey, we can make this a little bit more exciting for just the general fan.
What about bringing stage racing?
I don't really understand the point of that. Now, okay, so I understand the point of stage racing in the sense that for a long time they needed to basically invent cautions. I understand that was to group everybody back up, but I don't necessarily think that IndyCar needs that.
Some of these road course races and street course, they just get so spread out. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes,
maybe sometimes, but I don't think, because I don't think stage racing really accomplishes too much, honestly.
Well, I know it definitely helped NASCAR because it made the middle portion of the race that people usually tuned out more exciting, because for the longest time with NASCAR, they would get racy at the beginning to try to get in position, and then they would just kind of file and single file and go around. And then with like 25, 30 laps to go, they would start racing again. So it was like, well, I'm going to watch the first 20 laps and I'll watch the last 20 laps. And in between, I'll go mow the lawn. That's kind of what people would do. Now it's causes people to watch continuously. But I think this is more of a hot take than you think. I am a huge IndyCar fan. I love IndyCar. I love racing in general. I can't get enough of it. If I were to get offered a job in racing, I would leave what I'm doing and go work in the motorsports industry. Hands down, no matter what. But I did not consistently tune into the last few races of the IndyCar season this year, because it was like, well, it is Alex Palou. I mean, mathematically, Scott Dixon still has a chance, but Alex Palou has to basically not finish these last 2 races. It's like, well, that's not happening. So it's like, I didn't tune in. I mean, I do find it harder to tune into races a lot with kids, but during nap time, that was my time to tune in and watch. But with the NASCAR playoffs, I find myself working to be able to tune in and watch, because each race during the playoffs, especially as the rounds go on, have more and more meaning to them. It can be do or die for some of these drivers in their seasons. And the racing is extremely good. And I love the balance of the different types of tracks that you see thrown into the playoff for NASCAR. We see everything from the super speedways to road courses to the roval to, short course. It's everything. And then you wrap it up on the I think the oddest track that you have of the entire series in Phoenix. It's great. It's pure entertainment. And then it makes for an exciting storylines. Heck, I can't say for certain if in the old scoring system, I don't know. I'm not good at math. I don't know if Ryan Blaney would have won the championship this year with the old scoring system. But because of the playoff and how it is almost a clean slate for these 12 drivers that make it to the playoff, it's anybody's championship at that point. And Ryan Blaney was the last driver in, won the championship. It's like that's exciting. Whereas going into the last 5 races of the IndyCar season, you're like, well, that's Alex Palou's championship. Okay. I don't really feel the need to tune in, because also at the same time, Alex Palou was also winning every single race, it felt like. So where I kind of go back to it being a little bit warmer is the fact that even if you had a playoff system, if the same driver is winning every race, it doesn't matter anyways. But I still think something needs to be done, even if it's just like you have the final 3 races where you put your top 8 in, and then after 2 races, it's down to the championship 4, and those 4 are battling it out for the championship. I don't know, just something to shake things up. That just make it more edge of your seat. That makes it worth tuning in. And it's hard to point that says it needs to be done, because IndyCar is putting up some of its highest viewership numbers year after year. And so it's going in the right direction. I don't know if this just us being, racing fans and wanting to see growth. I don't know. But
the only thing I can think of,
a change.
So I'm looking at the final few races, and something that just kind of, because I pulled up the schedule for 2024 for the IndyCar season. So if you were to do the last few races here, because I went where is the last of each type of race? The last street circuit, of course, they finish at Nashville. Then they have.
Awesome. I think that's great. I think that's a great move.
That's a great move. Then you before that you have the 2 races at the Milwaukee Mile, and then you have the race at Portland. So 14, 15, 16, and 17, those are the last, technically the last 3 tracks, the last 4 rounds of the season. You have a street course, a road course, and an oval. So Perfect. Right. So I was going to say, what you could do is take take the top 3 in the point standings and reset them all back to 0, like basically like the same amount of points.
I would say top 4, because usually that top 4 or 5 is usually pretty close.
Well, anyway,
up to a certain point. Yeah.
Or I don't know, if you're within a certain percentage point of the leader or something, I don't know, whatever it is, whatever you want to do, and so you have all 3 types of tracks, and so there you go. Because that was the only thing I could think of is like, if you had like one driver's really good on ovals, you have Joseph Newgarden, who's really great on ovals, but there's no oval in the final like 4 races of the playoff, well, then that's a severe disadvantage for no, because like that's the thing is that there's not really, you talked about the super speedways and the Roval and all that stuff in the playoff this year, or in 2024 they're gonna have Watkins Glen in the playoff, which is really cool. Like, there's not, I mean, you have road courses, you have street courses, you have ovals. That's really it. There's no like, you have one, short tracks, ovals, or you have short track, street circuits, road courses. That's it, pretty much for IndyCar. So there's not really a whole lot of different tracks. So if you have a driver that's really good on street courses, and there's no street courses in the final, or if there's and there's no street courses in the final however many races, then and also Portland can kind of be a dumpster fire at times. There's a lot of attrition there, so that can also kind of bungle things up.
That makes it like the Roval,
right? So. But yeah, so I mean, I can see something like that because like that's the only thing. I think that's like I said, I keep going back to that. The what makes it work for NASCAR is the fact that there's 36 races. That's why it doesn't quite work, because with half the races for IndyCar, I'd hate to be like, oh well, hey, there's only 17 races, but let's make let's actually cut that almost down by a third or 2/3, or by a third, and make it a playoff, like a 4 or 5 race playoff instead, and make it kind of, what I mean? Like that would kind of, it's not quite like the same thing.
You don't even need to have as many drivers. There's not. I mean, 12 drivers for NASCAR works when there's
16. So there were 16 to start off with. So
16, it's gone. It keeps going up. Going up. Wasn't it? It used to be just. It was 10,
and it was 10 plus however many. Like you had to be like within a certain amount from the leader,
like a wild card.
Right? Yeah, kind of.
I think that's what they called it.
Maybe
the wild card slot.
I don't know. But it was
2004 was a long time ago.
Yeah, folks. It was 10, and then it's gone up to 16 over time.
B. Scott was a sophomore in high school. So.
But yeah, I mean, it would be cool to do something like that. I do think some tweaks to the points do need to be made, to kind of spice some things up. And I think the only thing that could be done is that whole adding like a. Like that last 3 race thing on an oval, road course, and street course. Do kind of like the top 3 or top, like
the top 3 drivers. You go back to 0 on your points, but you get 1 point for every race that you've won leading up to that point.
Something like that, yeah.
So like if you are Alex Palou and you won 5 races leading up to that point, well, you go into that 3 race playoff with 5 points. And then if some like Joseph Newgarden's won 3, he has 3 points. So there's Alex Palou has a 2-point advantage, and then so on.
Yeah.
However you want to do it. But so that way there's it's work. You get something from the regular season, and all of your work leading up to that point wasn't for naught.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I like that. That would get me really, really hyped up.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because I remember, watching. I think it was the Portland race, which was the second to last race of the season, where Palou did wrap it up, and I remember, it had to have been before that. Maybe it was the Detroit race. It was before the IMS, the second race at IMS for IndyCar, and I was like, hey, B. Scott, this would be a good topic because Palou's gonna have this wrapped up because before the last IMS race, it feels like. So yeah, it's one of like, it's one of those things where like, look, seasons like what Alex Palou had should be like marveled at because he was dominant, but also and like I said, it doesn't happen so often that a huge overcorrection needs to be made. But it's one of those things where it needs to be something that IndyCar looks at and says, can we like tweak this to make it to where it doesn't happen? Like, not that it happens that often anyway, but what can we do to make sure it happens
enough? It happens enough.
How can this happen less often, or what can we take a look at points wise to make it like if something like this were to happen, how can we at least make it more entertaining?
Right. Well, and also to make it more understandable for the fans.
Yeah.
Because it's like all of these what if scenarios with like four races to go, and it's so confusing. Whereas like when you get to the final race of the championship 4 in NASCAR, it's the driver who finishes ahead of every other championship 4 driver. I like it. That's the way it should be, right?
Right.
Like Alex Palou, I don't like didn't Alex Palou like well, he had good races, but like by the time they got to the last race, he didn't even have to show up. He won
at Portland, which clinched the title for him, so he didn't have to technically race at Monterey or Laguna Seca. So
yeah. So it's like whereas it put no emphasis. It was kind of like a bleh last race.
Right.
Whereas Phoenix, it's like you're on the edge of your seat that entire race watching that, because it's like, oh my gosh, the championship 4 are 1, 2, 3, and 4 right now on the track. Oh, and they're all within like 2 seconds of each other. This is exciting.
Right.
And it comes down to the driver.
Well, speaking of excitement, there's a lot of excitement coming down the pike for next racing season. Before we go, we want to take a look at some things that excite us for next season from around the racing world. For NASCAR, some things that I'm looking at, some things that are on my radar. I'm really excited for NASCAR to go to Iowa. June 16th, Iowa's on the schedule for NASCAR. I've been a big fan ever since IndyCar started going there. This was a long time. I remember the first Iowa race for IndyCar. It was when like Dan Weldon and Dario Franchitti were teammates at Target Chip Ganassi. So that's how long ago it was for IndyCar. Loved watching those races there. Still do love when IndyCar goes to Iowa. So exciting to see NASCAR go there. And also very excited that the Chicago Street Course race, North Wilkesboro, and the Charlotte Roval are back on the menu. I know there's some NASCAR fans that are like, boo, turning right stinks. But I'm like, you know what? I like the Charlotte Roval's there. Yeah, the Charlotte Roval's fun. The Chicago Street Course race was fun.
If it wasn't for Chicago, we would never know who Shane Van Gisbergen was.
Right. And also,
I think I butchered his name, but
right. But it was a fun experiment, and I liked it. And of course, North Wilkesboro, always a big fan of that. As far as IndyCar, the Milwaukee Mile's back. Not my first choice of an oval, but I am glad to see another oval on the schedule. So glad to see the Milwaukee Mile back. And then some silly season stuff. Marcus Ericsson driving for Andretti. Can he get them back into the mix atop the IndyCar landscape? And then Pietro Fittipaldi, bringing that legendary name back into the sport. Grandson of Emerson Fittipaldi, two-time IndyCar winner. He did race a few races for the series in 2018. So I was surprised to not see him be like as a rookie. Like he wasn't designated as a rookie. I was like, wait, he's not a rookie of the year contender? Because he was definitely going to be my pick in our preview show. He raced a little bit in 2018, but he's going to drive for Rahal in 2024, so we'll see what he can do. But those are some things that kind of catch my eye going to 2024 for IndyCar and NASCAR.
Yeah, hey, and another thing for silly season, Fat John. Wow, his name is completely
Roman
Grosjean is headed to Juncos.
Yeah.
That's exciting. That's going to be that's a huge move for Juncos.
Yeah.
I know Fat John has not had the greatest time in IndyCar, but I think this could be a good move for both Juncos and him. I'll stick with IndyCar. One of the things I'm looking forward to, I can't wait to see the growth that we see from Joseph Newgarden. He's had some up and downs seasons here the past 2 years, close in the championship hunt, really dominant on ovals. What kind of encore presentation does he have for the Indy 500 now that he's got that monkey off of his back after getting his first Indy 500 victory? Are we going to see a different kind of driver out of him, more loose? And then with the Indy 500 also in mind, Kyle Larson making that crossover, running the double header. I'm pumped for that. Yes. Finally, we have somebody coming in for the double header again, and it's a guy that I think legitimately
Good
has
win.
a shot of winning the Indy 500 because this guy is a race car driver. You put him behind the wheel, he's going to be competitive and he's going to be up there for the win. I mean, look what we've seen him, how he in his year that he had to go down to USAC, he just dominated open wheel there. So I'm just saying,
Do we
Kyle
know?
Larson in the McLaren
Do we
could be
know?
interesting.
Do we know the timing on that? Like what he would need? Like if he were to if the race, because the race the last couple of years has been relatively quick. So like, what's the timing on that? Like for him to win, go through all the celebration stuff. Now, granted, like some of the stuff he'd have to like cut short. Like he like,
Right.
but like
He would come back the next day
right,
and do
right.
some of it.
But
I don't think
like
he would have as many. Yeah, I honestly I don't know.
right, like that's kind of an interesting. Like, would it be a win? Drink, get a quick swig of milk, and then hop into the plane, hop in the helicopter, and
It would
fly away.
probably be you do your typical lap around with Dave Calabro yapping in your ear. Um, here he comes, race fans, coming to you in turn 3 on your feet. Okay, Dave, stop. I can clearly see, even though I'm very inebriated, I can clearly see the winners coming on the convertible right now at me. I think you would do that. You would do the, obviously, because that comes after the milk, the wreath, all that in victory lane. I think you do one kiss of the bricks, and then you're on a helicopter to Indy Executive to hop on your jet that takes you right to Charlotte. And what I'll be interested in, well, I think it would work better than you think, because like in the past, yeah, because there's really no track activity after Friday, after Carb Day. You got a lot of drivers going out making media appearances, traveling all over the country. I think so. Kyle Larson would, shake down Carb Day, hop on that plane, go to Charlotte, practice, qualify, back to Indy.
Well, I'm just talking about like if he were to win, what's the timing on like just like I'm interested to know like would winning almost jeopardize his ability to do both, not to do completely both. Like would he end up starting the Coke 600 like 10 laps down because he
I don't think he would.
okay, that's what I'm saying. Like because
He's too much of a competitor. I
well,
don't think
right,
he
but
I'm
not just saying because he would get caught up in the ambiance. I'm saying just logistically, would it? And I know you don't know the answer. I'm just saying I'm just kind of throwing it hypothetically out there. It's kind of an interesting question to me. Like hypothetically, what is the logistics of like his not really obligations, but like what is logistically like how quickly does he have to get out of there after winning the race? What time does the race have to finish for him to actually be able to take part in an actual somewhat of a celebration and then go to Charlotte and compete?
Yeah, that'll be interesting. And I think what helps that, because you always have sponsor obligations and everything,
Right.
but his sponsor for the
Is
Indy
this
500
the same for the
is
Coke Society?
HendrickCars.com.
Right. Yeah.
So
It's not like they're going to be like, you know what? No,
hey,
sorry.
we have to have that picture of you in the Hendrick Cars hat. Well, you're gonna get that. It'll be fine. Because I think he'll probably end up I think his car that at Charlotte will probably be HendrickCars.com as well, because then you don't even have to worry about fire suit changes.
Right.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't think that we've ever had to think about that. I mean, the closest has been Tony Stewart, and then the most recent being Kurt Busch. And that was the year Tony Kanaan won the 500. And Kurt Busch had a decent car. But yeah, I don't know. That'll be interesting. But yeah, I'm very excited for him to pull the doubleheader. And like I said, if there's anybody that could make that doubleheader exciting, it's him. And honestly, I feel like he's going to put more of his mindset on the Indy 500 because that's a one-off. Mm-hmm. He never runs well in the Coke 600 anyways. And it's one of those, it's like, okay, yeah. I mean, he's going to get his in NASCAR elsewhere, regardless. Right. So, and honestly, I don't think he would be doing this if he didn't think he had a chance of winning the Indy 500.
Right.
But as far as NASCAR goes, yeah, going back to some of these historic tracks like North Wilkesboro, that's exciting, especially seeing the transformation of that track on the Dale Earnhardt Jr. Peacock show. I love it that it's gone from ruins to what it is now. Going to Iowa, I mean, that's going to be technically it's a short course for NASCAR, and that's going to be some really exciting racing there. Honestly, it kind of almost like a Kentucky, maybe a little bit smaller than Kentucky, but it's kind of like,
it's definitely smaller than Kentucky. Yeah, because Kentucky is like a mile and a half.
But it's still kind of built. It kind of I don't know why it reminds me of a Kentucky. Maybe because of the setup of the stands and everything. But that, and then the fact that NASCAR is going back to the oval for the Brickyard.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited. I'm very excited for that. Because I just want to see because there's been some changes made to the cars. I think, and I think the oval will be competitive again, and I'm just excited for it, just to kind of see what changes have been made and if it can get back to the way it used to be. Because man, there used to be some really, really good racing on the oval for NASCAR at IMS. It was great. I mean, the Tony Stewart, Casey Kane battle from the early 2000s, that one stands out to me the most.
The one I always go back to is Bobby Labonte and Rusty Wallace in 2000. That's one of the ones I remember.
Yeah, and then you get into the ones that have also been fuel mileage races where Ricky Rudd comes out on top of some craziness. I mean, there's been some really good moments. And then it kind of got away from it, where you would have a Kyle Busch just absolutely run away with it, even with stage racing. I think things started going south for the oval at IMS for NASCAR the year that they had the tire debacle, where it was like every 10 laps they were pitting. Everybody hated it. I liked it because my seats were right across from pit road, so it was kind of exciting. It made for an entertaining day, but I can see how that can be boring if you're not close to pit road. But yeah, I'm excited to see that again. I think I saw the other day was so it's now 92 or 90. By the time we put this out, it'll be 89 days until the Clash at the Coliseum. That's a quick turnaround.
Yeah,
that is a very short off season.
Yeah.
Not even 3 months.
It'll be here before we know it.
Yeah.
Well, that will do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course Podcast. Thank you guys all for hanging out with us. Remember, you can like us on Facebook, 3C Media. Go like us on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter at 3C Media Sports. Go follow us over on TikTok, 3C Media. Go follow us over on, go subscribe over on the YouTube channel. Follow us everywhere. Go subscribe on the YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button.
Where you can subscribe, follow where you can follow,
right.
Like where you can like.
Ring the bell, do all that fun stuff over on 3C Media, and remember that you can listen to the Crash Course Podcast every week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be heard. You can hear the Crash Course Podcast. You can follow me at Crash Course FM on Twitter. B. Scott, where can they find you?
Find me on Twitter at Brandon_Scott87.
Well, next week we will be talking about the Colts. It'll be their bye week. We'll be wrapping up kind of the first half of the Indianapolis Colts season, kind of doing a debrief of that. We got some Colts to talk about, but until then, have a good week, everybody.